Because at that point, skill rating becomes meaningless. It says, well, we both have the same rating. So this rating system for our skill is telling us that we have the same skill rating. And yet one player is so clearly better than the other. I just think that's a significant problem. It forces you to ask the question, well, what does this mean in the first place? Why should I even play to get better? Why should I even try to get high skill rating? Because it doesn't mean anything. Because the players at the top, they're just abusing the system. And I think that things like that are so toxic to this fundamental goal of esports, this fundamental goal of improvement and mastery, that they have to be rooted out.
What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and I'm pleased to bring you another interview with a pro player. This time, we're talking to LGE Jake, who's known throughout the pro scene for being a very intelligent player on how he describes and models the game, which I think is something you'll pick up on immediately from hearing him talk. It quickly became abundantly clear that we're both Overwatch nerds to the point where we talked for almost 2 hours. So what I did is cut out a very concise portion of the conversation strictly about the SR system. For the purposes of this interview, I'm going to be trying my best to be the advocate for Blizzard's position and try to do my best job of reading what the SR system currently is good at and defend it as best as I can. But of course, something so complicated as this is bound to have very divergent opinions on this issue, and ours is just one of many. Jake is incredibly scathing of the SR system and gives some excellent examples about why context is all that matters. Now, my goal in covering this here today is to highlight LGE Jake, because I think he's a pro player you should know about, as well as his opinions on the SR system. This is still a very new type of series from us, but we want to keep doing it. And if you want to keep seeing more interviews with high-level players about their views on the game and the community, be sure to hit the like button, as it's the most clear indication for us for the type of content we should keep making. And without further ado, I bring you LGE Jake. So everybody, we're here with LGE Jake. If you don't mind, could you introduce yourself to the audience? What role do you play, first of all?
Hey, my name is Jake. I am the DPS player for Luminosity Gaming Evil, as well as for the Team USA World Cup team. Play primarily Genji and Soldier, with a little bit of Pharah mixed in.
You have this incredibly intelligent and in-depth discussion about the SR system, as well as many other topics on your mindgames.blog. But I'd like to see where you view the SR system and the problems that it has with it. So I think real quick, I will explain, of course. The game itself tracks a hidden MMR based upon the statistical inputs that you put in your matches, and it sort of rates the expectation behind the scenes of where it matches you. And then when you perform in a game, based upon how your performance is judged against other heroes in your rank, you then get a modifier onto the skill rating that you would have got in a normal ELO system. So a normal ELO system is your team has an average, their team has an average, and then you win or lose, and there's a modifier based on that number. Whereas this system, the SR adjustment system, adds another layer of complexity on top of that, where it tries to adjust for your own performance based upon a comparison, apples to apples, to other players playing that same hero. That is so complicated, first of all. Let me say, I have no idea how I even explained that. I think I made sense. I hope I did. Correct me if I haven't, Jake, but otherwise, develop it from there and where you have criticisms to it.
Best way to highlight the problems of the skill rating system are to highlight the ways in which it can be intentionally abused. I myself ran an experiment where I played prior to Top 500 releasing, I played 9 hours of Bastion only, being at the highest level of matchmaking. At the point when Top 500 released, after, probably 7 or 8 hours of Bastion, I want to say 30 or something in North America. And I'm no longer playing Bastion, but still at the same level. But my point playing Bastion was simply that because this hero is so unpopular, that simply playing it and doing exceptionally well compared to the other players playing it, because, of course, at the high level, it is the lowest picked hero. Essentially playing it and playing it well with like a high accuracy, high damage, putting out a lot of eliminations, I was able to get to this exceptionally high skill rating, top 30 with a win rate of like 52%. A lot of players will know, there's going to be a lot of Masters players out here watching this being like, well, what the heck? My win rate is 55%, 57% on my favorite hero. Why am I not getting this kind of skill rating? But essentially, the answer to that question is because I'm abusing the way the system works. Players that the system is comparing me against are at much lower skill ratings than me because, of course, Bastion is so unpopular at this level, so rarely seen, that I was able to sort of leverage that to lose very, very little when I would lose games and to gain quite a bit when I would win them. Because I knew how the system worked, I was able to play a bad hero, like a hero that is almost always a mistake to pick, almost always a less than ideal character, and yet the system would reward me for it. I just think that's a significant problem. You shouldn't be looking to do anything other than win, in my opinion, in ranked matchmaking. I mean, go play quick play whatever heroes you want, have a good time. There's no problem with that. And even in ranked, playing your favorite heroes, that's fine. It's not your responsibility to have the perfect team composition or whatever. But when you're specifically rewarding someone for picking a hero that is unpopular because it is so niche and honestly just bad in a lot of situations, it's a pretty big problem in my eyes.
The only problem with your argument, Jake, is that you made a mistake in your example. See, you actually won over half of your games, which kind of almost makes your point not as strong as it could, because of course we do know that there's players out there that use this strategy and lose 2/3 of their games, but yet the boon they get during those statistical performances in the third of games that they do win somehow mathematically must keep them at the rank that they're at. And I think that's even a bigger issue, because if it was the case where you just won half of your games playing a more niche hero, I don't even think that'd be as much of a problem. But it starts to get to scary levels when we're talking about win rates as low as a third or less, and they're still able to hold a really high rank. Maybe not top 500 necessarily, but high GM and stuff. And I think that's a bit of an issue. And I do have the counter argument to that, but
if you look at a tracer player, let's say, or maybe just a flex DPS player, let's say, at that same elo, to maintain that same, ultra high elo at, that top 50, top 100 elo, they're winning 60 to 65% of their games, significantly higher win rate than me, and yet they're maintaining the same elo. And that is, I think, the fundamental problem, right? The people abusing the system are less successful than the people who are at their same skill level, but who aren't abusing the system, who are, just playing the characters that fit the situation, or even just playing their favorite character at the moment, or experimenting, playing different characters. All of those hero picking patterns are punished compared to picking only one hero and refusing to pick anything else. That is, I think, the fundamental problem, that whatever SR you're at, if you compare someone at your same skill rating who only picks one hero, I can guarantee that that person has a lower win rate than you do if you're picking many heroes. I've never seen a case of someone with a equivalent SR to another player, a flexible player, compared to a one trick. The one trick can always maintain the same SR with a lower win rate. I just think that's a problem. I don't think you should ban people for playing Mercy only or Torb only. I don't think you should kick them out of the game or punish them. But I do think that they shouldn't be rewarded for that. At the very least, there should be a level playing field between players who want to play lots of heroes, who want to fill what the team needs, and players who only want to play one character.
Okay, I'm going to make an attempt to make some sense of this, and I'm sure it might even cause for some acid reflux as you hear me explain this, but the reason why it seems to me that they do it this way, the way the SR system works, is that it isn't necessarily intended to be a ranked elo ladder entirely. Instead, it has the goal to try to create matches where the mechanical skill set of players within a given SR is most similar. And because of that, what it does is that it doesn't allow a player who is playing mechanically very well but lose stay at a lower rank. Instead, what it tries to do is push those players up to play with players that are more akin to their skill level, so that the matches, when you play it at like a lower rank, you don't feel that you mechanically can't compete. Because of course, if there's a Hanzo who's at like GM, but with a 30-40% win rate, it requires pretty sick skills to be there. But if the game was based on winning only, and he played only for stats basically, is the point of the matter, and doesn't win, he would be pushed down into a rank where he would mechanically overwhelm those players and make it harder for them to play and make them feel like they can't progress in the system. Like, why do I have to play against this Hanzo guy who can shoot me so freely, right? Instead, why doesn't he have to go play players more akin to his skill level? But the game should be about winning, theoretically, but the problem is matchmaking itself is assumed to be unorganized, so players individually want to be ranked based upon their individual skill and be able to compete among players among their individual skill. And I think undoubtedly the SR system now actually does a pretty decent job of doing that. Now you can plus or minus say something is radically out of whack and there's some outliers, maybe Mercy you might say is a good example, but a player like yourself, whether you're in top 30 or a few hundred out of top 500, you're still among the best players in the world, right? You're kept away from playing against players like me who fear a player with mechanical skills like an LGE Jake, right? You're pushed over there no matter what you do, no matter what hero you play, because it's impossible for you unless you actively tried not to try or didn't play the way that you could play for you to drift down to a lower rank, even if you're losing games, right? You mechanically won't touch a player like me because you're just pushed over there regardless.
The idea, I guess, of like trying to maybe protect players from, stronger mechanical players is that people play the game and win the game in radically different ways. You can be a Lucio player who has very bad aim. Maybe you've never played an FPS before, but maybe you're a great strategic thinker. You know exactly how to use my speed boost. I know I have great timing on the amp it up. I know when to amp heals and when to amp speed. I know when to right click to peel for an ally. Maybe your mechanics aren't great and maybe your ability to actually hit shots with Lucio's left click is pretty low, but you can still win games with those skills. You don't need to be a mechanical god. Like take a character like D.Va. Tracking is really important on her. If you have great tracking, you do a lot more damage. But a great D.Va player, at the top level, of course they have great tracking, but a great D.Va player in ranked, I would much rather have a D.Va player on my team who is very careful about always saving Matrix for the right moment and always protecting the right allies than a D.Va player with insane tracking, if I had to choose. If that Hanzo player is losing games, it doesn't matter if his mechanics are great. If you're a lower tier player or maybe a mechanically less skilled or less experienced player, you can beat that Hanzo even though he's better than you, even though he can hit more shots than you. If you can pick, if you're smart, you pick Winston, you outplay him, right? Like you're ready to abuse the mechanics. You don't have to be a god tier Winston to make the right decisions about how to defeat a Hanzo. It's just about playing your shield and playing that positioning game. Even though that's arguably easier than the Hanzo hitting, crazy headshots, I don't think it makes it any less valuable of a skill. It'd be like matching Quake players based on who had the highest LG accuracy, as opposed to like which players can manage items well. If you look at players like Rafa, one of the most winning Quake players of all time, was never really thought of as like the strongest mechanical player in the game. Obviously impressive, obviously, an incredible talent, but there's always been players who have been more impressive on a certain weapon or another than Rafa was. But he wins time and time again, not by threatening them and forcing them into, intense 1v1 aim duels, but by constricting the map, by controlling items, and by out-strategizing them. And I don't think that you should reward players who are very mechanical and who don't think too much over players who are very strategic and maybe less mechanical. I think people win the game in different ways, and the only way to make a fair system is a system that doesn't care how you win the game, that doesn't say this is the right way to play, this is the wrong way to play. Because right now, if you're playing and you're getting great stats, the system's saying, good job, keep doing what you're doing. But in an esports context, they couldn't be less relevant. No one cares what your damage is in an esports context. Are you out of position and dying at a key time and losing your team a point? That matters a hell of a lot more than whether your accuracy is 2 or 3% higher. I would say that the system just has to be unbiased about how different players approach the game. Different people are going to do things in different ways, and that the system must be objective and sort of look at that all on a level playing field.
Wait, Jake, I hear what you're saying, but I have gold damage, so you're wrong.
Of course.
Didn't you know that trumps all arguments? Haven't you heard that?
All right, if you have gold damage on the support, then you can flame your teammates. That's the rule.
So, okay, how about the situation where you're playing sick, and I think there's maybe some debate whether that's always the case or not, but you think you're playing sick, and maybe you are, and your teammates don't perform well enough. Should you lose as much SR as they did? Is that fair?
Yep, because if you're a sick player and you're consistent and you're playing at a high level, some games you will get unlucky. You will play a big game and have, big plays over and over and over again, and you'll lose because your teammates made big mistakes, and those mistakes were more impactful than your big plays. And that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good at all. And I think part of the reason Blizzard implemented the performance aspect of SR is because they want to reduce that bad feeling. They want you to be, well, you played really well, so even though you lost, we're not going to take too much SR because we know you played well. And while, I have a lot of sympathy for that, I've been in the exact same spot myself many a time. I just think that the only answer to that is to just play enough games to where your SR actually, comes out, right? Like if you're a consistently strong player and you're having consistent game after consistent game, guess what? You're going to win more often than a player who is less consistent and who does less damage. I mean, there's going to be games where you have 6 players who refuse to get off DPS, and that's just unlucky, honestly. But the reality is that every player, no matter what you're doing, is going to have the same incidence of those games. The one thing I think is a particular problem is that Right now, the system has no means by which to reward players who have the specific skill of being really intelligent about composition decisions. Right now, it doesn't really matter. The system doesn't really care what you play, right? There's no reward for a player who knows exactly what hero to pick in exactly the right circumstance. That kind of skill in the game is not something you can measure statistically. You can't map to the percentage times in which you picked Winston in the right scenario and bing, bing, bing. Oh, here's an SR point, right? Like, the system can track things like accuracy or, kills per ultimate, but these things can never measure your decision making, your choices about when to switch heroes, and these things can be just as, if not more impactful to actually winning games as, having a high accuracy. So I would say any system that is going to prioritize statistics is a system that's going to miss the full story. Overwatch is an incredibly complex game. I think the problem is that it's so hard to get an accurate picture of the game from statistics that it's not even worth trying. You take a character like Winston. If you're doing the most damage technically possible on Winston, you are 100% playing wrong. You're probably taking way too many heals. You're probably playing too aggressively, and you're probably not making enough space for your allies. You're probably actually costing your allies space. So if you're just playing for maximizing damage, or let's say Mercy, you're just playing to maximize the number of players rezzed, you're not playing to win the game. And I think at the end of the day, that's a really frustrating feeling for some players when their teammates aren't playing to win, but rather to maximize their statistics. It doesn't feel very, very rewarding when every player is sort of this individualistic mindset of like, well, it's fine because as long as I do a ton of damage, I'll be fine on my SR. I won't lose too much. At the end of the day, I'd like to see a system that doesn't bias the ways in which players win and, allows people to sort of creatively explore the game however they'd like.
But what would happen to the players that do only want to play one hero? Wouldn't it undoubtedly mean, especially when they're off meta, mean that there were certain heroes that would never reach certain ranks because they just physically wouldn't perform? Wouldn't that sort of disincentivize players to play the game when the character they want to play can't get to a certain rank?
I don't think there's even a character in the game that makes it actually unachievable. I do think if you're going to play Torbjorn only, it's going to be a lot harder to make it to the top 500 because it's just a hell of a lot harder to win a ton of games playing only one character, especially when it's as one-dimensional as something like Torbjorn. But I also don't think that if you're someone who wants to play only Torbjorn, I just think that that's something you're going to have to live with. If you're pissed off because you can't get Grandmaster because you can't win many games, I think you're just going to have to deal with it or maybe pick another hero. I don't think everybody has to make it to Grandmaster. You'll have plenty of flex players right now that are trying their very hardest and maybe winning a lot of games, but because they're flexing to so many heroes, they're never able to achieve the really impressive statistics that are required to actually rank up in skill rating, over a long period of time. And I think for me, it's a much bigger problem that players like that are being suppressed than it is a problem that players who refuse to engage with hero swapping would be, having lower skill rating. I think that if you don't want to engage with hero swapping, that's fine by me. You do you. But if you're losing your team games because of it, I don't think there should be any special treatment.
Earlier, you spoke about a term that I think we can develop a little bit more on in context, of course. I've had many discussions with people, other YouTubers even, about this subject in particular, and one thing that I think gets posed often, in the community's mind at least, is that the blind statistical collection that Blizzard does behind the scenes could potentially, in theory, track everything that matters. It could somehow track context.
I disagree.
And why is that?
I don't think the technology is there yet, personally.
What do you think it would require to do so?
I mean, I think the fundamental challenge with things like statistics is there's things that it's like, I can't even imagine how you would track this. Let's say you're a McCree player, and let's say you're a really smart McCree player. So you've been counting the enemy Genji's ultimate, and you know that he has Dragon Blade, and you know that this is the last fight of the round. So in order to win the round, you hide in a corner, you flashbang the Genji, you right-click him, and you instantly die for your troubles because the whole team's around him. But because you killed that Genji, and because he had ultimate, the enemy team can't successfully push. They're unable to retake the point. You win the round. In my mind, wow, big play. That's an impressive play. That's a smart play. You had to understand the game well enough to know when the enemy Genji had ultimate. You had to know what your win conditions were for the round, which is that you had to stop the enemy Genji from getting a blade off, and you positioned yourself properly to take advantage of that. What the statistics show is that you flashbang one character, you killed him, and you died. Wow, that's a 1-for-1 kill death ratio. Nothing impressive, honestly. Statistical measurement, how do you track that? How many kills on a Genji with ultimate did you get while your charge percentage on the cap point was above 85%? I don't think Blizzard is tracking things like that. I don't think they're getting to that point. And I think that there's no consistent way to do that because sometimes that's wrong. You know, sometimes the enemy Genji has ultimate, but it's fine because you have double support ultimate, so you can counterplay. There's no need to hide and try to trade 1-for-1. I don't think it's genuinely possible. The game is too complicated to have a statistical measurement that tracks things as precise as that. If you just look at which McCree does more damage, the McCree that shoots the Roadhog only is going to do a lot more damage than the McCree that like positions carefully and tries to find backline support picks. But those backline support picks are inevitably more valuable than anything else he could be doing, even if he's trading 1-for-1 for them. To statistically separate two players, you're never going to successfully pick the better player a reliable percentage at the time. Even if you might say, okay, across 1 million games, the McCree player that does more damage is probably better than the McCree player that does less damage. I just don't think that's the case. I think if you're a really smart tactical DPS player, things like accuracy are actually going to be a lot lower than they could be. You know, if you're playing Genji, if your accuracy is above 50%, I'd say you're probably making a lot of mistakes. Because if you're not constantly spamming sightlines and missing a ton of shots, because that's what happens when you spam sightlines, if you do spam, your accuracy is going to be much lower than if you don't spam. But obviously spamming is the right decision because there's no cost. So track things like accuracy, damage, kills per death, kills per ultimate. All of these things could be good or bad in different contexts. And I just think that there's no reliable way to sort of mathematically separate the times in which it was good to make those decisions and the times in which it was bad to make those decisions. I think the only way to separate good decision-making from bad decision-making is winning games and losing games. And although some games will be lost despite the fact that you made the right decision and that you played perfectly, if you play enough games, your SR will actually work out to the right skill level. You know, you look at a game like Dota where everyone on the team wins or loses the same amount every game. The losing team all loses 25 roughly, and the winning team always wins 25 for everyone roughly. But in that game, you see a situation where almost every pro player is at the very top of the ladder. People of the highest skill reliably have the highest skill rating. Right now in Overwatch, you'll see people who have no hope of ever being on a professional team because they're just not smart players. They're not good players, and yet they're already pushing the bounds of the top skill rating system. Some of these players abuse 6-stacking. Some of these players abuse one-tricking. Any system that doesn't prioritize wins or that doesn't sort of exclusively look at wins is going to miss things, and it's going to maladjust the rank system. What's the point of having a rank system if you're not picking out the best players with it?
Now, there you transitioned into a point that you made on your blog that I think is actually very interesting. Now, to some degree, the system that tracks mechanics surely would be able to find very good mechanical players. So why would it be the case that a system that tracks you based purely on what you can do in the statistical department not translate into pro play? Wouldn't the system find the strongest individual pro players? Like, for instance, I think Effect from Envious is from straight out of matchmaking in Korea.
I mean, if you look at the very, 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 very top of the ladder, you know, you look at like top 10, okay, almost always all 10 of those people are going to be pro players. But that's because it's like the very end of the bell curve. So the people that are playing at mechanically that level often play the game so much, they get game knowledge. It's very, very hard to be that good mechanically and not understand the game. But the real problem, I would say, comes just a little bit away from that extreme when players who want to break into that pro scene and want to be known as like intelligent and strong players who could fit well on a professional team, those players, in my mind, being denied their position in the top 500, denied their position in getting those Overwatch League emails because a player who plays Mercy only is abusing the system and to get higher SR. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are at Mercy. If you only play Mercy, you will never be on a professional team because that character cannot be run full-time in a professional setting. I just think that what's the point of having a skill rating system that actually is gating tournaments? You know, you literally cannot join certain tournaments unless your skill rating is at a certain level. So in my mind, you have players who one-trick a hero to a certain rank, and that hero is not viable in real competitive play. And you are using the skill rating system to judge and adjudicate who can actually compete in this real competitive play. Blizzard is explicitly linking skill rating and real competitive play by using it to gate tournaments and by using it as a means to like scout players for the Overwatch League. As soon as they're making that connection so explicit, they have to give up any pretense that skill rating measures anything else than esports viability. The real problems come when you have players who are honestly winning some tiny fraction of their games and yet are being ranked and said to be, I guess, by the skill rating system, just as good as their peers who are, in any objective person's eyes, much better players. I just think that's a big problem when you have players who are much better than players who are rated the same as them. Because at that point, skill rating becomes meaningless. It says, well, we both have the same rating, so this rating system for our skill is telling us that we have the same skill rating. And yet one player is so clearly better than the other. I just think that's a significant problem. It forces you to ask the question, well, what does this mean in the first place? Why should I even play to get better? Why should I even try to get high skill rating? Because it doesn't mean anything. Because the players at the top, they're just abusing the system. And I think that things like that are so toxic to this fundamental goal of esports, this fundamental goal of improvement and mastery, that they have to be rooted out.
If you could lay out your ideal SR system, what would it entail? And especially the places where it's different than the one we have now.
Solo SR, party SR. Basically, if you're in a party, your wins and losses affect party SR. Solo SR remains completely unchanged. If you're by yourself, it's solo SR that goes up and down. Top 500 should only be by solo SR, so that very, very top players are motivated to play solo, so that at that point, the ranking system becomes very individual and very much about rating the best players to decide, who's going to get these invites to the Overwatch League, because that makes or breaks someone's career. And I think at that point, it's more important than party queue or wanting to play with your friends, because at that point, it's a career. It's not, about just playing with your friends as a hobby. Other than that, I'd like to see no performance SR games. I'd like to see all SR wins and losses predetermined prior to the match occurring. If you're a team of 4,000 average and you beat a team of 4,200 average, you deserve more points than a completely even win. But I don't think it should be based on some statistical measurement of your contribution to the game, because I just think that those statistical measurements are inevitably bad. And I think if you have those things, you have consistent SR gains and losses across a team, and you have a differentiation between solo and party MMR, or just, forced solo queue. I don't think they're going to do that. So I think that the split MMR system is a better system, at least. I don't think that players should be punished or rewarded for the ways that they approach the game. I think that the only way to have a truly objective system is to just isolate wins and losses, Ultimately, this is a game with objectives, and you win when you cap the objectives. Nothing else. I don't care what your McCree accuracy is. If you make stupid decisions all the time, you shouldn't be rewarded. If you're dying at key times and teams losing games because of it, that's unfortunate. But I say your skill rating should reflect that. It shouldn't reflect anything else.
Does skill rating matter?
Sort of. So I do think skill rating does matter in the sense that it's sort of an okay predictor of skill. Like, it's not terrible, but at the same time, there's so many exceptions to that prediction that it becomes meaningless as an actual career builder. And I think that's what's so important about skill rating, is more so than just individuals feeling like they're accurately rated for how good they are and what their contribution to the team is. This is people's lives, this is people's careers, their dreams on the line. And when you have a top player, a really intelligent, flexible, cooperative player who really has potential in the esports scene, but who it doesn't have an exceptionally high skill rating, I would argue that's a much more significant problem than anything else in the system, because you're having players who, in my opinion, deserve a shot at the professional scene, but aren't getting it because of the way the skill rating system is structured. Guess what? The players who are being artificially inflated don't get the shot either, because when I see a Mercy player at 4,700 elo, I'm not impressed, honestly, and I'm not thinking about giving that player a tryout. I think that ultimately the skill rating system has to be simplified, and it has to get rid of these easily abusable mechanics in order to really open up the potential for undiscovered players to make it onto the pro scene.
Jake, man, it's been a blast talking to you. Please let the viewers know where to find you on all your social media, when do you stream, and anything else you want to shout out.
You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/Jake_Overwatch. That's the full word, Overwatch. I stream a little irregularly with the pro schedule, but I try to stream quite a bit. So if you follow me, you can catch me whenever. I also have a Twitter under the same, at Jake_Overwatch, also the full word. You can follow me there. You can also check out my blog, on which I post semi-regularly about Overwatch balance issues, design, structure, basically whatever I want. Always about Overwatch, though. That's mindgames.blog, spelled just how you would think, no spaces, no punctuation. So other than that, just find me on the ranked ladder, man.
If we could touch there. Maybe if I start playing Mercy, I'll find you.
Yeah, honestly, you've got a pretty good shot.
All right, man. Thanks. Well, guys, that was sure an intense conversation. Emotions are high, and I'm sure many of you have opinions on the things that we spoke about here today. Leave them in the comment section down below. I'd love to read them. This is a conversation that's been going on since the SR system was announced. Blizzard has gone back on other ideas before, and this might be one that they do again, though I don't have much confidence in that being the case. I think instead, they're going to continuously try to tweak it so that outlying examples don't get exploited. But ultimately, no matter what they do, I think there always will be ways to manipulate this system when it's set up this way. But there's always Face-It around the corner, we hope. That's exactly where I want to be playing. And third-party matchmaking cannot come soon enough, because the way matchmaking works right now has its benefits, is probably very good for players that don't take ranked very seriously but want to see what they can do on a certain set of heroes they like. But that's not what competitive Overwatch is about, at least in the pro scene. There's a lot more higher level strategies and win conditions at play that aren't surrounding mechanical skill. And it might be okay that matchmaking is what it is, and another type of matchmaker is built to satisfy the other needs that are respective to winning as the only indication of who's better in the game. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It really does help us out, and especially with series like these, lets us know to keep making these. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're gonna wanna hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description, you can check out all of LGE Jake's social media links and our links as well. That's been it for me. It's been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.